Hi guys, it's Will again. In this week's video, I'm going to explain how I tried to look for temp work. Now, you're probably thinking, Will, don't you already have a job? And yeah, I did have a job. I'm going to explain why I ended up looking for temp work and why I needed to find temp work. Things happen, and temp work is kind of something of an emergency, something that you want to do even if it's, any type of work really. And yeah, I got into that situation. Needed to find something quick, otherwise I'd be struggling for my finances and to pay the bills and to survive really. And I've got the rent to pay too. I had 6 months on my contract for the rent, so I had a few months left on the contract. So I needed to find something quick. But I'm going to explain why I ended up in this situation and why I needed to find temp work, or try to find temp work, that is. If you've ever done temp work, it's no normal job, but here we are. We've got to do what we got to do.
So, as a reminder, I worked as a property manager down in Weymouth, and basically, I enjoyed it to a point. I saw some beautiful homes, flats, but it got very busy, even for a town as small as Weymouth. And bear in mind, this is the first time I've ever tried to be a property manager. I thought it would be a cool job. Get to see people's homes, get to see how it works, how people buy their homes, rent their homes, and so on. But eventually, it got really difficult. And I think one of the bosses could tell. So after 3 months, he basically brought me into his office and told me, unfortunately, he had to let me go. And yeah, that was quite hurtful, but you know what? It it's fine, I thought. But I had to find something because I had 3 months left of my contract with my renting at my flat. And Polly, I couldn't just tell Polly I didn't want to. So I should mention that Polly is my landlord. Yeah. So I just felt a bit embarrassed to tell her that I had lost my job. And essentially, I needed money, basically. I wasn't in full panic mode just yet. I did have some money in my savings, but again, it's not really something that you want to touch, especially when my savings was purposefully not meant to be touched. I wanted to use it for my house, basically, one day. And my current account, it was dwindling, basically. I will admit, I am pretty bad at saving. I need to be better at it. So, on week 2 of no job, I was beginning to be panicky. I went online, went on a computer, and searched. Basically, that was my days of searching jobs. The problem was Weymouth is a town, it's got very few jobs. And to my surprise, I did get an interview for a job at The Range. And now, if you've ever heard of The Range, it's like a department store. And yeah, so I was really grateful actually I had the interview, especially in this time when I just lost the job at the property management. So I went for the interview, dressed up smart. I sold myself quite well and I felt confident about it. The problem was they mentioned the hours, and the hours they were offering was 22 hours a week. I don't know about you, but for me, that was very low. It may be enough to pay for my rent, but that's about it. So, to my surprise, I actually got offered the job. But, like I said, 20 odd hours is not enough. So, sadly, I had to reject it. I know, 20 odd hours. Maybe I should have taken it just in case. But for me, I was looking for something that was 35 hours a week at least. So, back on a job search. Now, it's been 3 or 4 weeks without work. Now, I was getting a little bit more desperate. I knew I could interview quite well, but actually getting the interview is another matter. So, I got a few more interviews. These interviews ranges from cleaning work to working in retail to working in customer services. So eventually I had kept going with the interviews and actually got another interview. It's very repetitive, as you may know, for those who are working and looking for work at the same time, or just looking for work in general. It can be a very long and harsh and tough process because depending on where you are, some jobs where you're quite limited, and if you're not picky, it's a bit easier. In this case, I definitely wasn't that picky. I just needed something fairly quick. So this interview I had it at uh, a clothing store and got the interview. I just did the interview as well, and yeah, it's one of those places I usually buy clothes from. Basically, they had opened the store, and it's quite a well-known store. You might recognize it with the images provided. But yeah, did the interview, and yeah, just was a bit of a waiting job again. And roughly at the same time, I actually had another interview for another particular job at a place called Alexander Gardens. Now, you're probably wondering what that is in Weymouth. It's a place that I walked past before. Um, it's an arcade, basically. Part of me, I was thinking, yeah, that'd be quite cool to do some temp work in there. And yeah, I actually had the interview, dressed up quite smart again, as I usually do. I do believe in presentation because I remember seeing people who have done interviews and some people just dress up in casual clothes. I never understood it. For me, it's about presentation, and making a good first impression. So that's what I did in this um, interview at the arcade. And to my surprise, I actually got the phone call about the job at Alexander Gardens. That was to start in a week's time. Thank God that I actually got something finally. It was 37 hours working. The only thing was, it was sort of no structure really, but you're working 37 hours regardless in a week. At very latest, you'll be working till 10:30. Earliest, it was 8:30. So yeah, it was a bit of a rough time in the sense of, working till late, but still the worst. It's a job for now. My first day, it seemed quite nice actually. Everyone was quite welcoming and they were quite friendly for sure. The managers made me feel welcomed, introduced me to everyone, showed me around the arcade itself, which was really nice. So, what did I learn about learning to try and find temp work? I actually learned that it's quite, I know it's going to sound controversial and a little bit much, but I actually think it's relatively easy to find temporary work or just work in general, as long as you're not picky. I think if you're picky, then it's harder to find work. Obviously, it depends on which or what type of work you're looking for. So, yeah, that's one thing I definitely learned. The other thing I learned is interviewing is really trying to sell yourself. And I think I did that quite well. And that's one thing I learned from interviewing so many times is that I can generally sell myself. Now, doing the work itself is a different matter. If it's something that you're not particularly fond of, whether it be doing a cleaning job or working in a cheese factory, then then it can be a bit more difficult because especially if it's something that you're not really interested in or your heart's not in it. So you have to kind of have some level of dedication for sure. In my case, it definitely was needed because, well, it was almost desperate, to be honest. So I found work for the rest of my duration at Weymouth, basically. Now, what did I do after that contract ended in the accommodation in Weymouth? Did I stay longer? Did I stay longer at Alexander Gardens Arcade? Well, I'll leave that till next time. Anyways, yeah, finding work is relatively hard, but it's relatively easy if you're finding any type of work. So, one big part of it is just dedication. Anyways, hopefully, you have a good one.